All right, City Clerk, public hearing.
Item 6A, hold a public hearing and adopt resolutions approving fiscal year 2020-21 operating and fiscal year 2021-25 capital improvement program budget, approving city appropriations GAN limit for fiscal year 2020-21, approving the city's master fee schedule for fiscal year 2020-21.
We're going to turn it over to the city manager, and I'm almost certain that the finance director will follow. Oh, I see the finance director. My apologies. But maybe you're going to give him an introduction, proper introduction.
Sure, I'll give him a proper introduction. So our presentation will be led by Keith DeMartini, our finance director. We've had 4 meetings with the city council directly on the budget, very long study sessions. We've gone over 350 slides, reviewing information with robust question and answers, and I think the city council has heard from me enough, and so we're going to have Keith give the presentation tonight, which is a brief overview of our proposed budget for 2021, and then staff is here to answer any questions, myself, Keith, as well as our department directors. So with that, Keith DeMartini.
Thank you very much, Javon. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Keith DeMartini, your Finance Director, and it's my pleasure to present the final presentation of the proposed operating and capital budget for fiscal year 2021. So the objective of tonight's meeting is to hold a public hearing requesting City Council's approval of the fiscal year 2020-21 operating and capital improvement budget, as well as approving the city's appropriation or GAN limit for fiscal year 2021 as well. The agenda for this evening is to provide just a high-level brief overview of much of the content that staff has already provided over the prior budget retreat and budget study sessions that have already been held over the past month, including the general fund, a few enhancement requests that are included, the city's reserves, an overview of the city's enterprise and internal service funds, our capital improvement program, the Measure G district sales tax revenues and allocations, one vehicle request in the proposed budget, the master fee schedule, the GAN limit, alternatives that the City Council may consider this evening, and then finally our request to the City Council, and then of course questions and answers. So let me start by just providing a brief overview of the sessions that have already been held. We had a kickoff the later part of May, which was followed by an all-day retreat presenting an overview of the budget and going through each departmental budget. That was then followed in the middle part of June with another all-day retreat reviewing the enterprise and the internal service funds, as well as the capital improvement program. Staff met with the Citizens Revenue Measure Oversight Committee last Monday on June 15th to present the Measure G allocations to that committee. And then finally, here we are this evening, where staff will be requesting the City Council's adoption of the proposed budget. High-level overview, the city's proposed budget is about $180 million when you look at all of our funds. The general fund, which is the largest fund for the city, is just under $50 million. There are 265 full-time equivalent positions and over 100 capital improvement projects in the larger capital improvement program. The city's fiscal condition is challenging this year, most notably due to the impact related to COVID and the shelter-in-place orders that are in effect, and the significant reduction of economic activity around the area, which has directly resulted in reduced revenues for the city's current fiscal year situation, as well as being projected into next fiscal year. This slide just summarizes some of the most significant challenges in the city's financials that are in the 2021 budget. Including in the general fund, with much of our general taxing revenues declining and our departmental revenues declining in the budget year. Our Stormwater Enterprise Fund has its challenges with inadequate ongoing revenue to sustain not only the annual operating expenses that are required to maintain the stormwater system, but not enough revenue to work on any capital improvements. The city also has its challenges with ensuring adequate funding for vehicles and equipment and technology replacements in our equipment reserve fund. Our city self-insurance fund is also has its challenges with not having adequate reserves on hand in case of an event of a large insurance claim that might be filed with the city. The city is also underfunded with its facilities and building reserve fund as well, with really inadequate resources to not only maintain the city facilities, but also enhance them for ongoing needs of the community. The city net services department has also had its challenges over the year, and so we have talked at length about the ongoing and increasing negative fund balance in that fund and the impact and the pressure that has on the city's general fund to really have adequate reserves in times like this. So we'll provide an overview of that this evening. And then also kind of skipping down a little bit to the bottom, Measure G was a district sales tax measure that the voters adopted back in November of 2019 that took effect this fiscal year. And that fund that new additional sales tax revenue source will prove to be a vital component of hopefully balancing the budget this upcoming fiscal year, as well as implementing a number of enhancements in the coming years as well. So just a high level, in developing the budget for the upcoming 2021 year, staff was looking at approximately $8.2 million deficit, resulting from both the reduction of general tax revenues and departmental revenues, as well as ongoing increased expenses for personnel and other contractual obligations. On the revenue side, the impacts primarily stemmed from COVID-19 and the sort of the recession and economic downturn from that. Our transient occupancy tax, or more commonly known as our hotel tax, was projected to decline approximately 40% year over year. We're also projecting a substantial decline in sales tax revenue from reduced sales activities, including our Measure G district sales tax as well. And then you can see in our recreation programs and our senior center programs a significant amount of declining activity as well. On the expenditure side, staff was projecting an increase of approximately $4 million from mostly personnel cost increases and additional operating cost increases. Approximately 75% of the general fund budget goes to pay for personnel, so it's the most substantial use of our general fund revenues. The base budget included additional $900,000 of PERS pension cost increases, which we talked about at detail at one of the study sessions, as well as additional health benefit costs and minor increases to various supplies and contract categories as well. Overall, the proposed budget that was discussed with the City Council included a number of budget balancing strategies that staff is proposing to be implemented to balance the budget in fiscal year 2021. And this slide here lists those budget balancing strategies that staff articulated in the proposed budget, as well as walked through in a great level of detail with the City Council over the past month. This budget balancing plan includes a number of items, from defunding or reducing scope or identifying alternative funding sources for a number of projects in our capital improvement program. It also includes the delaying filling, holding vacant 13 positions in the upcoming fiscal year. And the staff has an update in regards to the number of vacant positions to be identified, which I'll provide in a few slides. Staff has also identified a number of operating expense reductions, as well as delaying the ongoing allocation of funds into our equipment reserve fund. Staff has also proposed to leverage funds in our general fund reserve, as well as other funds, to transfer into the general fund to help balance. Staff has also identified and proposed $2 million from the Measure G district sales tax fund in order to balance the general fund as well. And then finally, staff also identified $1.7 million of personnel cost reductions from various measures, again, subject to the collective bargaining process, all of which were folded into the proposed budget to help with balancing. Since the date of this report, the staff is still in negotiations with the employee bargaining unions regarding that $1.7 million personnel reduction line item. Since the budget was first presented to the council, staff has identified 5 additional positions proposed to be held vacant during the year in order to achieve approximately $729,000 of additional savings. And those positions are listed here on this slide. That leaves approximately $1 million remaining of additional savings to be identified. Excuse me. If the City Council adopts the resolution this evening for the budget, staff will adjust the departmental budgets to reflect these additional vacancies accordingly. As such, the adopted budget will be balanced. The city will continue to partner with the labor unions to identify those additional specific reductions in order to avoid any further personnel reductions. In the event that an agreement is not reached, staff will return to the City Council at a later time with specific reductions in order to implement the required budgetary savings so that we have a balanced budget at the end of the day. This slide here shows a very high-level summary of the beginning fund balance, the revenues and expenditures, and what the ending fund balance is projected to be in the general fund. And as you can see here, the ending fund balance in fiscal year 2021 is projected to decline to under the reserve policy target of $1.5 million to $1 million. Again, much of that due to the slides that I presented earlier with the reduced revenues coming in and the continued pressure on our expenditures. The majority of the general fund revenues come from the taxes, our property tax, business license tax, sales tax, and TOT. And the majority of the city's general fund revenues go to pay for the public safety function of police and fire at just about 56% of total operating expenses, as you can see on this pie chart here. This next slide shows a high-level summary of the major components of the city's general fund revenues, a majority of which are coming from taxes. As you can see, taxes are projected to be down about 11% year over year, and you can see that a majority of the other sources in our general fund are also projected to decline year over year. The line on this table called allocation and other revenues is projected to increase, and what's included in that $10.3 million number in the proposed fiscal year 2021 budget are all of the transfers in to the general fund from the other funds, including the Measure G district sales tax fund. Those transfer ins are recorded here on this line for your reference. This next slide shows where those general fund dollars are spent by department. You see primarily the general fund dollars are spent on police and fire, as I indicated earlier. In the proposed budget, it does include a very small number of enhancement requests. Again, the cost of these enhancement requests are included in the proposed budget, and so it's fully encompassing the cost of that, so you can really understand the impact on the budget. And these enhancements include additional wellness screening with the fire department staff. It includes an intern in the planning department to work on housing initiatives. It includes an allocation of funds for the city to work on the housing element update. It also includes additional money to reclassify an existing position in the Parks Department to a Parks Service Manager. And there's been an update on that, which I'll get to in a few slides. There's also an item to install library computer cabling in the library as well. Also in central garage and in building facilities, there is a request to reclassify a position so that there is a facilities and garage services manager position in central garage and building facilities. And then finally, there's a small request for Microsoft Office 365 city licensing to implement a more robust Microsoft product citywide. Again, all of the cost of all of these enhancement requests have been included and folded into the proposed budget. This slide here shows what the ending fund balance in the city's general fund reserves are projected to be. Again, staff presented this in a great level of detail in the study sessions. The main takeaway on this slide is that staff are projecting that all of our general fund reserves are projected to decline into the fiscal year 2021 budget, being that part of the budget balancing strategies are to actually dip into and use some of these reserves, particularly the general fund reserve, that second line right there, projected to decline by about $600,000 year over year. So at the end, when you add up the total amount of the city's general fund reserves, including all of those reserves on the prior slide, it adds up to about $19.9 million. And as the staff have discussed in prior study sessions, the amount of available cash on reserves is actually hindered by the substantial negative fund balance in the CityNet Services Enterprise Fund. That fund is projected to have an ending fund balance of over $13.6 million by the end of next fiscal year. So that really reduces the available cash that the city has on hand in the event of an emergency or the event that the city needs to have that cash available very quickly. And then if you were to consider the available cash that we have in our equipment reserve of about $3.4 million, our total reserves that we have available in cash is just under $10 million. And that represents less than 25% of our annual operating expenditures, which is the target that is articulated in the city's reserve policy. So at the request of the city manager earlier this afternoon, staff was able to research the budgets of a number of peer cities in San Mateo County to try and articulate this point a little bit further. This graph right here shows these cities' reserves as a percent of their total general fund expenditures. Most of these are included in their either proposed or recently adopted fiscal year 2021 budget. And San Bruno's bar line is on the bottom, and what this shows is that San Bruno's total reserve percent compared to our expenditures is about 19%, which is less than San Mateo, Burlingame, and South San Francisco, and it's on the lower end, similar to Redwood City and Daly City. It's also important to note that when comparing San Bruno's total reserves to these other cities, just the pure dollar amount of reserves that we have on hand, San Bruno's is the lowest. It's the lowest by more than $2 million, with the next closest city being Daly City of having just a little over $2 million more than San Bruno. When you look at our reserves, comparing it against the city's populations, a per capita comparison, San Bruno also rates towards the bottom of this, with only Daly City coming in lower than San Bruno. All of these other cities have a higher per capita reserve amount compared to San Bruno. Again, this just is additional information and context as it relates to the limited reserves that the city truly has in order to be used for any additional budget balancing strategies in the proposed budget. This slide right here is a summary of the 4 enterprise funds on the city: water, wastewater, stormwater, and CityNet services. And it shows what the revenues and expenditures are projected to be, what the surplus or deficit is, and the ending fund balance. And as we've talked about in prior sessions, the water and the wastewater funds are fiscally healthy, primarily due to the rate increases that the City Council adopted in prior years. And those funds will be used on the very robust capital improvement program for both of those enterprises over the coming years. The Stormwater Fund has its challenges. It's projected to run a deficit of just under $500,000 and is projected to unfortunately have a negative fund balance starting in fiscal year 21-22. And so staff will be working on identifying additional dedicated revenue for that enterprise in the coming months. And then also CityNet services. That enterprise has turned a corner with being able to renegotiate a number of its longstanding contracts and identify cost savings, which will help in the upcoming fiscal year. But there remains a very large negative fund balance in that fund, which again hinders the ability of the city to have cash available in our reserves. This slide here summarizes the city's 4 internal service funds. All of these funds in the proposed budget are projected to meet the minimum reserve target of having 15% in the fund in the event that they need to leverage those funds for specific, more immediate needs. And the city is proposing to increase the ending fund balance in the self-insurance fund gradually over time so that we have more funds available in the event of a large insurance claim. This slide right here summarizes the over 100 capital improvement projects in our CIP, from water to wastewater to stormwater, all the way down to streets and technology. And what it shows is that over $60 million of funds have already been appropriated for many of these projects and will be carried forward into 2021 with very minimal strategic funding requests being requested in fiscal year 2021. And over the 5-year program, there is over $206 million of funding being planned to implement these very important capital improvement projects. The table on this slide summarizes the appropriation requests using the Measure G district sales tax revenue. As I said earlier, the Citizens Revenue Measure Oversight Committee met for the first time last Monday, and staff presented an overview of the proposed budget to the committee, as well as this slide with the proposed allocations of that fund. The committee unanimously approved of the proposed Measure G allocations in the 2021 budget, with the exception of requesting an alternative funding source for the Parks Manager Enhancement Request position. And so they took an action to approve of reducing the overall allocation down to $2,555,000, removing that item. Staff is in concurrence with the committee's feedback and recommends to the City Council that that Parks Manager Enhancement Request be funded through an allocation of the general fund balance, which would reduce the general fund balance to just below $1 million. This slide right here just summarizes the one vehicle request in the Water Enterprise Fund that is being requested in the proposed budget for $65,000. There are no other large equipment or vehicle requests being made in the proposed budget. In the staff report, there is a website link to the city's master fee schedule. The City Council does receive sort of an update on the master fees annually during the budget process. There are no updates to the fee schedule during this budget cycle at this time. But as the City Council is aware, staff is working on a comprehensive user fee study. And so at the conclusion of the analysis and the work on that study, staff will bring that to City Council for its consideration soon. The GAN limit is a voter-approved initiative that limits the amount of tax-generated revenue for a municipality. And the GAN limit is based on an adjusted basis from many years ago due to really based on cost of living and population growth within the area. And the city's adjusted fiscal year 2021 appropriation limit is well below the cap set forth in that law by over 32%. So we are in compliance with that law. The City Council does have alternatives to consider when choosing to approve of the budget. You may amend the appropriation amounts contained in the proposed budget this evening at the time of approval. You could also elect to not approve of the proposed budget that would take effect on July 1st. And in the case that you do choose to do that, you can adopt an alternate resolution which would assure continued municipal operations. And you'll see in your packet this evening attached to the staff report an alternative resolution for this purpose if the City Council chooses to go down that direction. This slide right here, in closing, is an updated budget balancing plan that has been updated on the line for utilizing available fund balance in the general fund and increasing that amount from $500,000 to $544,000 to account for the Measure G Revenue Oversight Committee's recommendation to identify an alternative funding source for that enhancement request for the Parks Manager position. So this table has been updated to account for that. And then finally, just a quick status on the personnel cost reductions. Again, staff originally presented $1.7 million of personnel cost reductions subject to labor negotiations in the proposed budget. Again, since then, 5 additional vacancies have been identified for potential savings, and staff are continuing to work with labor on reviewing additional options for consideration. And staff will return to the City Council very soon after the budget is adopted with the specific reductions that have been confirmed in order to achieve the required savings for fiscal year 2021. So staff's request to council is to hold a public hearing and adopt resolutions approving of the fiscal year 2021 operating and capital improvement program budgets, and also approving of the city appropriations limit for fiscal year 2021 as well. And that concludes my presentation this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. If you could take down the slide presentation. Thank you. Just for clarification, because it does say on the agenda approving the city's master fee schedule, that is not one of the items that we need to do this evening. That will be coming back to us, so there is no change at this moment or nor action being requested. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. So at this time, this is a public hearing, so we're going to go ahead and open it up to the public with council's approval in case anybody needs to do something else after they have their comment or want to stay with us. They're welcome to. Do we have any members of the public, City Clerk?
Yes, we have one. Anna Maria, one moment while I bring you in the room. Anna Maria, I'm trying to unmute you. I'm not able to get Anna Maria unmuted. And we don't have any other hands up.
Okay, if something changes, if you would let us know. So I'm going to let you, City Clerk, work on that just for a little bit. I'm not going to ask for a motion to close public hearing at this time in case we get connected with the member of the public. And then, City Clerk, if that does happen, could you please let me know so that we can let the public member be heard and then close public hearing officially?
Yes.
With that, thank you. With that said, let's move it to council for questions and comments. Not seeing any at this moment.
To the chair.
Councilmember.
I would just say that we have been meeting for many hours. Council has had numerous study sessions on the budget. We've looked at many different things, and this has been, for me, an experience I've never experienced before. You know, I can remember going through a company meeting back in January about this pandemic that was coming, and I knew then, when I looked in the eyes of a former fire chief who said, "This is real, this is serious," that I know he wasn't joking. And I just, you know, here we are in June, and I just can't believe what it's done to our community, what it's done to our city. And so this is a very difficult budget to review. I just want to commend staff. Keith, you've done an excellent job. Javon, an excellent job in presenting to us many different options and trying to figure out the best way to balance our budget. City of San Bruno has struggled for many years. We've never been fat. You know, it's never been a city where you can say, great, we've got a lot of extra money, let's hire that position that's been pending for a number of years. One of the positions we've always wanted to hire was someone who's a public information officer, so we can ensure that we get better communication out to the residents. But it's a position that hasn't been filled over time because of budgets, and it's always the one position that gets put behind. We need to look at only essential services. And, that saddens me when I have to look at wanting to include all essential services, because I think that the library or the recreation program or all the police officers that we can have on the streets, that those have to be cut. And so this is a extremely challenging time, and I just want to commend staff for doing a great job on this.
Okay, I'm going to go to Vice Mayor Salazar, then I'm going to ask for the close of the public hearing. Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to echo Councilmember Davis's comments and thanking staff. I know this has been a very difficult budget to get through, and we've seen some amazing things coming up, up until this point. And last year, we were able to whittle away and save and cut and actually come up with a budget that was balanced, and we were really making some strides to getting our arms around this thing. And then we had a couple of businesses fail on us, and then we had COVID-19, and so this is where we are now. And I know this budget has been particularly difficult for staff, and so I just wanted to thank you, commend you on the work that you've done to get us to this point. The structural deficit that we've seen for so long, it doesn't even make sense to look at that now. I'm looking at the $500,000 that we're taking out of the fund balance, which in normal times that would have been a huge red flag for me, and I would have been thinking about, okay, so what else can we do? But we're holding positions open. We're taking from reserves. We're using fund balance and all of this to just keep the lights on and keep us moving forward. I know it's difficult. We've already robbed Peter to pay Paul, and probably robbed Paul to pay Peter again. And I just don't know where we could cut anymore. I know it's not a great situation to be in, but I am hopeful that we're going to get through this quickly. I see that staff does have a very solid understanding of the operations and where our priorities should be. So I am confident that this budget that we have in front of us, while it's definitely not ideal, is a solid one, and I think the plan is solid, and I definitely support moving forward on this. Thank you.
All right, before we move on to other council members, there is no member of the public at this time or others that have raised their hand. I've been notified. So can I please have a motion and a second to close public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
City Attorney, do we actually need a roll call for closing the public hearing? Could that be done verbally?
I think for that you can do it verbally.
Thank you. Therefore, by voice vote, all those in favor of closing public hearing, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? I have a 5-0 voice vote to close public hearing. We'll bring it back to City Council. Councilmember Mason.
Hey, so this is my first budget year, and I think it's been tough. We learned prior to COVID that we were looking at an approximate $4 million deficit. I think a lot of this is just really the city not having made some decisions, for years. I think that the good news is I think we're heading in a good direction. I think the development impact fees, the Airbnb, the TOT, we've got a number of things that are moving along. But I'm really sad that we're going to have to wait on Florida Park to really get that moving. And really, I guess frustrated might be the right word around, what's going to happen with our municipal operations, such as the library. With that said, I do understand that this is, there's no money, and I understand that staff has worked really hard to make this budget work, and I know that there's going to be some repercussions on employees, which I think is difficult for anybody, especially the employer. what I wanted to ask about was in particular about Measure G. Thank you, Keith, for pointing out the $44,000 number. And I think for those of you, for the public or from council that did not attend the Measure G committee meeting, I really want to applaud Vaughn Gregory. After 3 members had voted to move forward, Vaughn said she didn't feel comfortable because salaries were not part of the intended use of Measure G. And with her leadership, the rest of the committee did agree that that was not part of the intended use, and that's how that ended up being essentially stricken from the budget. And so with that said, I did want to ask whether the remainder of Measure G or a percentage of it, I believe there was about $470,000 remaining. And I wanted to request that $300,000 of that be used for what was advertised and what was intended, which would have been for street repair. And how would that work? And that question would be directed to Keith, if that's a possibility.
Finance Director DeMartini.
Yes. Councilmember Mason, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Okay,
thank
great.
you.
So yes, Councilmember Mason, it is possible for the City Council to take an action this evening that would appropriate $300,000 of the Measure G district sales tax revenue for street repaving in our existing street resurfacing CIP project. If that action was to be taken, it would reduce the ending fund balance in the Measure G district sales tax fund from $462,000 down to $160,000. Staff's opinion in regards to reducing the fund balance down to that low is that is rather low. Again, it's our first full fiscal year of having the district sales tax revenue being generated in a year where there is so much uncertainty and volatility into that potential source. That ending fund balance so low is rather concerning, but the council is able to take an action for appropriating $300,000 if you choose to do so.
With that said, what would be a recommended number?
I would say that having the ending fund balance in that fund anything lower than $300,000 is likely too low.
Okay, and so there is I'm sorry. What was the so if you kept 300,000, we would use how much?
You could propose to use $160,000.
Okay, so then I would propose to use $160,000. I just feel like a portion of that has to go to what was advertised and what was really honestly the number one request from the public in the survey that was sent out. And other than that, I really, what's there to say? We've been at this for hours on end. I know staff has worked on this. It's just really depressing numbers. But I do have to say I appreciate the work that staff has done in the past, in particular 2 years, to really try to start bringing revenue in so that we can turn this around. Because I think that without these new revenue sources that we're getting, we're going to keep digging our hole deeper. So thank you.
Councilmember Davis.
I just want to comment on Councilmember Mason's recommendation, and that is, I think we're in a unique situation this year. And I think even in the interview, for all the candidates we interviewed, there was only one candidate who didn't agree that the funds this year shouldn't be spent on essential services, right? I mean, I got to tell you, if your son is walking home from a friend's house and gets pistol whipped, you care. And I care, because when my niece was almost in that situation, I want to make sure that our residents are safe, and that this year, those funds should go towards essential services to make sure we keep our city safe.
Councilmember Medina.
Yes, thank you. It has been a very difficult I understand and been through hours with the staff, with all our council here, and I do struggle with the Measure G part, but this is an unprecedented time now where we have to choose between having our staff being able to do the work. And if it wasn't for the passing of Measure G, where would we be then? We have, I got to look at the numbers again, excuse me, but we already are talking about 13 vacancies and potentially, depending on how we can work a deal out with the union to minimize going much further than that. I can tell you from direct experience, being the first laid off employee in San Bruno history, that it's a very impactful decision that we're making. And knowing that I don't think we really have a choice. So I will vote in support of this budget. I think I appreciate Councilmember Mason's attempt to allocate and make sure we get some money in there, because Measure G was supposed to enhance what San Bruno is going to be doing, and we just can't enhance when we have such a big hole in our budget. So we could go ahead, and I wouldn't have a problem with saying put whatever funds over into the paving program. That's not much money, but it's still an acknowledgement of where that money was supposed to go in the advertisements. Legally, it can go anywhere. Yet we are in a very fluid situation as we're waiting to hear back from our bargaining units on what they're going to do and what we need to continue doing as we probably come up and we'll be facing a emergency where we're going to have to spend money in it, and it's happened every year that I've been on the council. So yeah, we could say it's going to go to Measure G, it's going to be in that slot, but we would have to move it around later on. And I think with so much uncertainty that it's just shuffling money around a little bit. But at some point, we need to make sure that the funds that are supposed to enhance the services or the conditions of our city are met. So I'm okay with that. And we need to pass the budget. We don't have the option to continue operating without it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Mason, you have your hand up again? Yes? You're on mute.
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to comment. I think I've been pretty clear that one of the reasons I didn't support Measure G was because I didn't want it to become a slush fund. It was also, no sunset. There are a number of reasons I can go on and on. But I think it's important to also acknowledge the situation that we're in. And, I think Councilmember Davis made a comment about safety and security. And I do read the reports every week. I read them, if not daily. I catch up with them on the weekends. And even with calls for defunding the police, I'm clear that at this point, there has been, I've made a request, and I know others have as well, that we are looking at our use of force policies. We have a chief who's been commendably very vocal and active in committing to provide a report to the council on the policies that we have, what the cases are, and some metrics around it. So with that said, even with all my concerns around Measure G, this is really an unanticipated situation. And for those reasons, I will be supporting this budget tonight. But I also am requesting that the council also support that there is money available. Our finance director has said that it's okay to alleviate some of that budget to go towards what was guaranteed to the public. And really all I'm asking is that the council support what the public voted for and requested, which has already been suggested by the finance director. So thank you.
Okay, I think the finance director was not going to say he suggested it. He gave us an amount because he didn't want to see it go under the 300,000, which would be 160. The Measure G committee obviously did not have that opportunity, has not been asked that question. They were on the others. And as you pointed out, Councilmember Mason, as I watched too, the committee reassessed in regards to the 44,000, and Mrs. Gregory brought that up. That's probably why they made her chair. So anyway, so now she's the chair. I do want to say a couple things, and I know that my colleagues and I know I have received various emails in regards to whether it's, I think the word is better, reallocate rather than defund, or about the percentage of public safety budget. So at our last council meeting, there was a member of the public who had made a comment, which is great, about more training, combat, that 8 weeks they're in the police academy and they're on the street with a gun. And I want to clarify that, to my knowledge, that is not accurate. Not in this city, nor in any city, that the police academy, to my knowledge, is 6 months, 5 days a week, about 10 hours a day. That they also have their 4 month with the field training officer, which means that person is watching them in the car every moment. And then they're on probation for 18 months. So I just wanted to clear that so that nobody walked away with that expectation that that's what it takes to be a San Bruno officer. They are trained. I also wanted to look into, because percentage were brought up, and in South San Francisco, their public safety between police and fire are 55% is what they have. They have about 67,000 population, about 30,000 population in Burlingame, with a percentage of 49% for public safety. And what you also understand is ours is requesting it for the police specifically at 19.3. And you have the city of Burlingame that is about 18 and a half just for police. So when you start to talk about the totality of everything, when we talk about Burlingame, they had calls of 41,662 calls for service. For the city of San Bruno, 49,581 calls for service. And I think it's important, and I'm only saying these things because I want people to understand when they also were saying about we're too much in the schools. We have one officer, a school resource officer that city taxpayers pay for, that's not supplemented by any schools, or private, public, junior high, high school, etc. We have one officer that serves every school in this community, one. So you don't have somebody who is there sitting at the site day in and day out. We also have been hearing about how we don't, now let me tell you, I'm sure the police chief might say, if that's okay, you want that officer on the street, we won't go to the schools. Personally, I think they're needed. He's not saying that. I would think that's another resource that he would have. There's also was comments about we're not having our officers doing the right thing and we're not having the professionals maintain those services. Looking into it, I can tell you that we have CORA for domestic violence counseling and response. We have Life Moves for the homeless population to make sure they're getting the necessary needs, or at least offering those services. First Chance to provide counseling for substance abuse and treatment. We have the Conflict Resolution Center that is also used. There's also SMART, which is a trained AMR paramedic unit that responds to mental health calls. Now, that's at a county level, a lot of these, but in SMART, I would encourage our County Board of Supervisors to increase that, since it's only during Monday through Friday during the business day. So this department, as other communities, work with the appropriate individuals that are trained in this. But on the SMART that I just talked about, they will not respond. They will not, their people will not allow them to go to a response without a police officer next to their side. So I think it was just important to mention a few of those things. And as far as salaries for the police department, salaries alone, it is going down. It was this weekend, 682,000, but with what has been readjusted, it may even be closer to $1 million. So I think the department is always been Marty's worked for the city. I was here when we've had difficult times in 01, 08 as an employee, 08, 09 as a council member. And we have never been, other than a lean city that tries to provide excellent service to its residents. And so I want to make it clear with the police, because though I can empathize with people's concern, I think some of it is not well based when you start to look into it. Personally, just on the police, because they seem to be getting all the attention as far as a lot of my emails, aside from fireworks, that they are doing a good job. They have stepped up to the plate. When we've needed them, in incidences that we've had in this community, we have seen those individuals who step into action, step into danger and in harm's way to provide the service to this community and its residents when called upon. So that's it for me. Is there any other comments from council? Councilmember Davis.
I just want to say and clarify that, I mean, we're talking about a budget this year. I agree, Lynn, Councilmember Mason, that next year, this Measure G, and I think we as a council have even agreed to it, we want to put it towards what we said we would. And we all know that we hear from all the residents in the community about how bad the streets are, how bad the sidewalks are. There's not a street I can walk down that doesn't need some work on it. So I agree with what you're saying. I just have a hard time this year. It's just so bad. When will hotel tax turn around? I hope soon.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Yeah, I also wanted to follow up on Councilmember Mason's comments, because I agree that we absolutely need to be faithful to that commitment that we made to use the funds in a particular way. And I'm a big advocate of getting our streets paved, and that's why I was a big proponent of Measure G, because I do want to see that money go where it's supposed to. I want to see the potholes fixed, and I want to see streets repaved. But getting back to the finance director's response in terms of what could safely be used, and especially after seeing what's happening to our reserves just across the board, they're being decimated. And I guess if we hadn't already touched reserves, it would be a slightly different situation. But I'm wondering, what is the probability that we may still need to dip into this again? And if we don't dip into it, those funds, I imagine, could sit there and eventually be used for the right purpose, even if we don't dedicate them today at this point. And more from a planning standpoint, is there some benefit to letting that amount grow and then potentially doing more cost-effective projects, because we can do either more streets in one shot or do some of the streets that are more deserving or more needy with the money if we let it grow a little bit.
Okay, and let's see. Thank you, Vice Mayor. City Manager.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. Why don't I try to address this issue brought up by Councilmember Mason. So the request to essentially move $160,000 from what would be fund balance in the Measure G fund is something that can be accommodated. I support the finance director's assessment that at a minimum we want to leave about $300,000 in that fund. There may be overage on other road projects and or what Councilmember Salazar mentioned, adjustments once we see what actually comes in throughout the year. So leaving a fund balance makes sense. It's also important to remind the City Council that the process that we had envisioned for Measure G allocations was for staff to make a recommendation, that recommendation to go to the committee, for the committee to opine upon that, and then come back to the City Council for final decision. Should the City Council authorize $160,000 essentially to be moved from the Measure G account to the street paving program, there at this moment is not a project that would utilize those $160,000. And so what we would do is when we have our next Measure G committee meeting, staff will develop a recommendation for where those funds could be allocated. Maybe it's leveraging an existing project where we can do a bid alt to maybe slurry an additional road or some network tagged onto an existing project this year. We will have the Measure G committee opine on that and then bring that to the city council. So there will be in that process several months before those funds are actually expended. And so that will allow us time to go through that process in keeping with our prior commitment, but also having enough time to have at least the first quarter of sales tax remittances actually received from Measure G before we confirm those expenditures. So should the council desire to do that, we can follow that process.
Okay. Oh, Linda.
So
Go
just,
ahead.
it's easier just to do this.
Yes, no problem.
So then we could vote on that tonight, and then it could be with the, I guess, preface that it goes to the committee for approval so that it follows its regular process. I just want to confirm that.
Yes. Not approval, but a recommendation that would ultimately be forwarded to the city council.
Okay.
And so the city council's final decision on that will come later. If the council chooses to make that decision tonight, essentially you're moving it from one bucket to the next, but the final confirmation of expending those funds will not come until later.
Are you saying, city manager, that would need to be a part of the motion?
No, it doesn't have to be.
Or it's a separate recommendation aside from the resolutions, correct?
Right. It does not have to be a separate motion. But in any event, this amount will come back to the city council because at $160,000 for any project, that's above the city manager's expenditure authority. And so the final contract and the actual expenditure has to come back to you anyway. Okay.
Colleagues, I'm being informed the person that had their hand up that was having a mute issue unmute, her hand is back up. I know we closed public hearing. I'm not going to take a vote, but with consensus, I would like just to allow her that opportunity since we were having that technical difficulty. We can get her in, we will.
Yes.
The city clerk.
Okay. Anna Maria, just one moment. Anna Maria, can you hear us?
Hello. Good evening. Yes, I can. Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you so much for taking this time to listen to me for a moment. And I wasn't really well prepared. And I came in just in time to hear you, Mayor Rico Medina, mention about the police and the several emails that you've received from community members expressing their concerns. And while I do regard that some policemen or women in the force do good jobs, and that's good, but I also want you to recognize there is a concern among residents, right? If you're not just getting emails from me, but other people, then I question what's, how are San Bruno residents really feeling, especially in the marginalized communities that specifically live in Lower San Bruno, in the avenues that are often patrolled and policed, profiled by the San Bruno PD. So I just want to make that clear, and I really respect and honor your time. Appreciate you listening. Like I said, I will continue to stay involved in my city as I have for my whole life, serving the city of San Bruno and the larger San Mateo County as a teacher, as an educator, currently as a farmer. But I worked at the San Bruno Public Library for several years, and I'm a proud San Bruno resident. So look forward to continue working with y'all and listening and hoping that you also truly listen and are in solidarity with the real life situations that are going on in this community and beyond. So I appreciate your time and thank you.
Thank you very much. And I know that you sent us, or you sent myself an email at 7:19 this evening. I haven't had an opportunity to read it yet. I also want to just say, any email that the council, they've allowed me just to at least acknowledge it so everybody knows it's been acknowledged. It's also on the website, as well as if it was any San Bruno resident, I did email them back saying I was more than willing to spend time to have a conversation. And anyone who left their phone number who was a resident, I reached out and called them personally. Also, just for your knowledge too, to the speaker, this city council together came up with a statement of support and condemned, along with the police chief, of what transpired and the commitment going forward. And we all read that, and that has been posted. It also is that the police chief and the city manager and the city council has committed, and they are already have been in the process of reviewing the policies for the department and addressing the questions and concerns that have been raised, not only in this community by some residents, but throughout the state, throughout the country. And that is being worked on, and there is commitments from our chief and from our manager to address that, to look into that, to bring it back to the council as a whole for a study session so the community can be updated and informed. And if that means we need to hold a town meeting, or it could be a Zoom, could be in person, or something else, but those commitments are there. This council stands united, not only against hate, but about moving forward and making things better. So back to the council. Linda, you have your, is that from before?
Yes, no, that's for now.
Okay.
I wanted to thank Anna for her comments as well, and just to know that we are looking into this as my son gives me his toothbrush.
That's a good sign.
My husband taking him away. Thank you. I just wanted to, getting back to business, I wanted to make sure Anna knows that we are receiving emails. We're receiving emails, I think, on both sides of the fence around police defunding, police reimagining. And then we also have a number of emails from individuals who are supportive of police. And just echoing what Mayor Medina said, which is we're taking this all very seriously, and we are waiting on some metrics. I also wanted to just really, because we're going to take a vote soon, really encourage the council to support the additional funding for street repaving. I think it's not a huge amount, but it's a lot for what we have right now. But it's also really, I think, symbolic to show the public that we are taking these funds very seriously. And these are needs, just like any other needs that we have. And if you're a car that's passing a pothole every single day and have gotten flat tires, that's just as important as a number of other items that we're prioritizing this year. So I think it just is more than anything letting the public know that we are considerate and we're aware of the funds and what they're meant to be used for. And then lastly, and I don't think I'll say anything more, is I was just hoping, for the sake of the public, that the city manager could speak a little towards Florida Park. Since we are not likely to fund it. This was brought up on May 26th, but for those who are listening tonight, I know that you're being creative around some other avenues to fund the park, and if you could just maybe give something brief so the public knows that they're not forgotten if they live around Florida Park.
And then, thank you, council member. And then, city manager, here's what I was understanding, so I want to reiterate it. You can clarify that these action items for the GANS initiative, as well as the operating and capital improvements, would go as is, and if there's consensus and recommendation by this council to either, if it's to allocate it tonight, then it would be a part of this. If it is to, as you had made a suggestion of having it go, waiting for the first quarter, which would come back in October report, going to the committee and assessing it then. So that makes it in two different elements, but I just want to make sure I heard it correct. City manager.
Sure, Mr. Mayor. With regard to Councilmember Mason's request about the $160,000 to be allocated to our pavement management project this year, the council has a decision. You can act on that request and actually allocate the money to that project, so from the Measure G fund to that project, or you can provide direction to staff to develop a plan to program an additional $160,000, and we will take that to the committee, and when it comes back to the city council, you can allocate at that time. Or the third is you can take no action on that and approve the budget without that. With regard to Council Members Mason's request to talk about Florida Park, why don't I do that very briefly and remind the public or let those that have not heard know that the proposed budget, as a budget balancing strategy, does include removing $900,000 from the Florida Avenue Park which will delay the installation of that park. However, the city as a whole is not backing away from that commitment to both design and build Florida Park. 2 meetings ago, the City Council did approve a contract amendment in the amount of $44,000 to complete the final design work. So we will have shovel-ready plans for the beautiful park that has gone through significant community input. We intend to continue to seek grant and other funding to make Florida Park a reality. With the remaining money that is in the Florida Park project, we intend to take down the fence, install grass, and open that area up to the community so it can be used as a open space grass area until a park is developed. And so we are currently developing plans to do that and hope to have that done as soon as possible, but certainly within 2020.
Thank you. Okay, it's back to council. We have, again, we're not approving the city master fee schedule, so we have the 2 items. What I may suggest is that we take a motion second to adopt the resolution on the city appropriations for the GAN, because I think that's straightforward and there's not the 160,000, so we can get that taken care of. So do I have action on that?
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second, roll call, and that is to approving the city appropriations GAN limit for 2020-2021.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Mason.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Medina.
Aye. Now we have approving the fiscal year budget 2020-2021 operating and 2021-2025 capital improvement program budget. But the question that's going to come up is the 160,000. Is it part of this from the Measure G, or is that or we approve it as is and it goes back as a second thing, which would be on a recommendation? Hopefully that's not too confusing, but that's how I understood it. Please correct me, attorney, if I'm wrong. Councilmember Medina.
I'm looking at page 363 of the budget of the capital improvement program, and it has a $200,000 allocation for Measure G.
We're gonna thank you, Marty. We're gonna throw that one right to the finance director.
Can you say that page number one more time?
363.
Councilmember Medina, that is a Measure G allocation for the street light pole replacement program, which was one of the items that was proposed to be funded through Measure G allocations. It was on slide 24 of tonight's presentation.
Got that.
Okay. All right. So actions from council in regards to the operating and capital budget.
Motion to approve the budget as is and to have council review once we have actual funds in an account.
Review the 160. Are you referencing, or?
Yes, review the 160. Yes.
Yeah, maybe at the first quarter.
Yes.
Okay. Motion made to have the operating and capital budget as written, as submitted by the manager and finance director, and then to have it reviewed as far as October's first quarter, and then to see about 160,000 potential going back to Measure G committee if so desired.
I'll second.
A motion made and seconded. Is everybody clear on the motion, or are we good? Or should I ask more staff to make sure they're clear?
Clear.
Can I get clarity on that? Does that, I guess, clarity as far as what is being approved as this? Because so I'm clear, I think this should be, because there was such a delay in having the Measure G committee. I really do think this should be part of the budget that we're approving tonight.
Okay, so I'm going to clarify, but the motion and the seconder were to have the budget approved as is, not with the 160 included in the allocation under it, but to have it come back after the first quarter assessment from the sales tax and where we sit, and then to see if it needs to go back to the committee for their review. And correct me, motion and seconder, if I'm wrong.
Correct.
Do you want to propose a friendly amendment?
Apologize, folks. Water went down the wrong pipe.
That happens.
Yes, go ahead.
So I was only going to add that, we actually did jump through some hoops to get that committee seated so that we could have them in place and have them render their opinion prior to making allocations. And it almost seems now we're reversing the process and trying to get ahead of their decision by dedicating the money, when it should actually be their purview to review the recommendation and then bring it to us. And it sounds like the city manager was saying that even if we shift buckets right now, it's still going to go back to the committee and then come back to us for a decision. So it doesn't seem like we're really going to lose any time or gain any time by shifting buckets tonight. It's still going to go through that process. So I don't know that we're going to lose a lot of time.
As it should.
Yeah, I think, so I guess this is a question for the city manager. I mean, I said I wasn't going to approve a budget without the Measure G committee. And so I know it was set up immediately after that, those comments were made. So my question is, would this be, whether it waits or not, will this be coming as part of this year's budget? My concern is, are we saying that we're waiting to get more money? I'm just trying to figure out what the process is. Can we approve it tonight pending approval from the Measure G committee?
So in any respect, this will occur in 2020 and not be a part of next year's budget. It will be a part of a amended budget for the 2021 fiscal year. Can you allocate the money to the pavement improvement project without a specific project identified? Yes. Your other question is, can you approve it pending a recommendation or pending action from the Measure G committee? That's no, because the Measure G committee does not allocate or commit the city to projects. Only the city council can do that. They are advisory only. And so right now the $160,000 is above the city manager's spending authority, so I would not have the ability to commit it on behalf of the city. And so it will come back to the city in any event due to the dollar threshold. And so whether the city council decides to allocate that tonight or wait and allocate it later, there will not be a time loss. It is simply a process change of what bucket you would put it in tonight.
Okay, so I'm going to reiterate that from the motion and the seconder, it is to approve the budget as submitted. That, and to be clear, that means the $160,000 would not be a part of this approval that we're doing on this motion. However, just as the city manager said, it can still be allocated, come back and be amended. And is that clear? And city manager and city attorney, am I correct? I hear nothing that's going to silence is
Correct.
Means okay.
Correct.
Okay. All right. So if that's clear,
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, yes.
I raise my hand all the time to the
I'm
device.
sorry.
I'm trained, you know.
My comment. I apologize.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I just really want to acknowledge Councilmember Mason's interest, but I think it's really important to try to have a 5-0 vote here. I don't want to, I want to be able to say, okay, we're going to get to that, Councilmember Mason, at a later time, and we will. The money will get allocated there eventually. I just hope that we could just agree on this, you know, that we all take this seriously, and we need to do more repairs on our streets and sidewalks. I'm going to vote for this, but I can give you my word that and staff has, I think, done a good job in answering the question that it's going to come back, and we have time to deal with it. So I just wanted to throw that in there. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. I think you're correct. It would be nice for 5-0. I think staff has had to work very hard in some difficult and challenging times. And also, Councilmember Mason, that is what folks are looking for. I think even the Measure G committee would say, yeah, that was our hope. That's what we wanted. And, thank God Measure G is here to help the staff and our community to the best it can. So agreed as well. It's not to say it's not coming back. It's not to say the 160, but I'm going to support the budget as well. So thank you. I'm seeing no other hands up. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Davis.
Aye.
Councilmember Mason.
Okay, can you repeat one more time what we're voting? Can Councilmember Davis repeat one more time what's on the table? In regard to the $169,000 funds.
Okay, maybe we should, I want to make sure Councilmember Davis certainly can. I don't know if the city attorney, I just want to make sure that once the vote's done, there is abundance of clarity to it. So do we want the city clerk or city attorney or council member? I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Sure. Mr. Mayor, can I attempt to do that?
Yes.
So the motion is to approve the budget as recommended, and in regard to Councilmember Mason's request for an additional $160,000 from the Measure G fund balance, that will be tabled until staff develops a recommendation for that $160,000, takes that to the Measure G committee, and brought back to the City Council.
To the motion maker and seconder, is that accurate to your motion and second?
That's how I understood it.
Yes, and just in my reasoning behind this is just I want to make sure we actually have funds and that this is all proposed what we think is coming in, so why not just wait at that point to spend that money or to put it into that bucket?
Okay, thank you both. Thank you, City Manager.
Mr. Mayor.
Vice Council Member. Who's
It's
speaking?
City Manager. Just for ultimate clarity, as proposed in the staff report tonight, because there have been changes from the initial proposed budget on May 22nd. Most notably, the additional positions and the change in the $44,000 for the Parks Manager.
Thank you for the clarification. I'm seeing acknowledgements from both Davis and Salazar that they understand and acknowledge. Linda, does that answer your question? So.
Yeah, I think the part that was not clear was that this would be tabled. So this decision is being made tonight that these funds aren't here yet, but the decision will be tabled once we get the funds. And in the meantime, a plan will be created on how to spend the funds. So I would just ask that the city clerk please make sure that that's noted in the minutes. Thank you.
Or in the motion. I think what it is that Councilmember Davis said is it's unprecedented time, so let's make sure the money's coming in too, because we may find that there's 200,000 left and we want to take 160 still.
Yeah, what I didn't want to support is just saying we're not even going to deal with it tonight. I think we need to.
Anybody said not to deal with it is in what I assessed. So we were at roll call, and City Clerk, you had Davis already acknowledged, or?
Yes, aye.
Okay.
Councilmember Mason.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Salazar.
Aye.
Mayor Medina.
Aye. I want to thank all my colleagues, and I think a 5-0 vote is needed in these times. We can be united in a lot of things, and I think this is an important thing, as well as all the effort and work to staff. Thank you. Keith, Finance Director, are we going to see you anymore, or are you done for the summer?
I'm going to take a little vacation, but thank you very much.
Okay.